They threw me out in the snow with a wool cloak, a heel of bread, and the particular politeness people use when they have decided you are already gone. I was 24, old enough to know the council had wanted me out since the spring, young enough to still believe somewhere under the cold that being innocent ought to count for something. It did not. Innocence is a poor coat. I learned that walking through the gate of the only pack I had ever belonged to, listening to the bar come down behind me, and feeling the wind decide to take an interest. The charge had been theft, a brooch of the late Luna's found in my things. I had not put it there, and everyone who mattered knew I had not, which was precisely why it worked. You cannot defend yourself against a lie that no one actually believes, because no one is asking you to. They are only asking you to leave. So I left. The forest past the gate was the kind of dark that has weight to it. Snow came down in the slow, patient way that means it intends to keep at the job all night. I walked, because walking was warmer than not walking, and I aimed myself at the old healer's croft, 2 valleys over, where a woman named Edda had once shown me which mosses stop bleeding, and where I thought, if I was lucky and the cold was slow, I might reach a door that would open. I did not expect to be followed. I heard it first as a wrongness in the snow behind me, too light for a wolf, too steady for a deer. I turned, and there in the blue dark stood a child. A pup, 5 years old, perhaps 6, barefoot in the snow, which made my heart do something painful, in a night shift and nothing else, with hair the colour of dark honey gone silver at the edges with frost. She did not speak. She did not cry. She simply stood 20 paces back on the path and looked at me with the flat, certain patience of a creature who has decided where it is going and is only waiting for you to accept it. I knew who she was. Everyone in the territory knew the king's daughter. Sela, the pup who had not spoken a word since her mother went into the ground a year past. "You cannot be here," I said, which was both true and useless, the 2 qualities most of my sentences shared that year. She blinked at me, snow caught in her lashes, and then she sat down in the path, neat as a cat, as if to inform me that the negotiation was over and I had lost. I have made a great many bad decisions in my life, and I would like the record to show that picking up a barefoot child in a blizzard was not one of them. I wrapped her in my wool cloak, the only thing I owned, and I carried her, and she let me, going boneless against my shoulder, with a trust that frightened me more than the cold did. A pack does not throw away a child. Whatever else is true, that is the one rule even cruel packs keep. So either she had run, or someone had been careless with her in a way that was its own kind of throwing out, and I did not yet know which, and both were terrible. The croft was empty. Edda was gone east for the winter, but she had left the hearth laid and the latch unlocked, the way the old healers do, because a healer's door is the one door in the world that is supposed to open. I got the fire going. I rubbed the child's frozen feet between my hands until she winced, which was the best sound I had heard all day, because a child who can feel her feet is a child who will keep them. I gave her the heel of bread. She ate it watching me, and when she was done, she lay down on the hearthrug, put her thumb in her mouth, and slept like the dead. Like the safe dead, the kind that get up again. I sat against the wall and watched her breathe and thought, well, I have lost everything, and now I have stolen the king's daughter. The morning is going to be interesting. The howling started at the door an hour before dawn. Not the child, she slept on. Wolves. Many of them, and one of them louder and more terrible than the rest. A sound that was not hunting, and was not grief exactly, but was the noise a grief makes when it has been given a direction to run in. I knew before I opened the door who I would find. You do not mistake that sound for anything else once you have heard it. It is the sound of the most powerful wolf alive, looking for the only thing he has left. I opened the door. The Alpha King of the northern reaches stood in the snow in his human shape, with his wolves ranged behind him, and he was a wreck of a man. I want to be honest about that, because the legend does not allow for it, and I was standing close enough to see the truth. Snow in his black hair, his eyes gone the flat gold of a wolf too close to the surface. He had clearly run the whole night on foot and on 4 feet both, searching, and he had the look of a man who had already begun rehearsing how he would survive finding a small body in the snow. He saw me, the exiled thief in the doorway. His face began to do something murderous. Then he saw past me, to the hearth, to the child asleep and breathing and warm, with her thumb in her mouth and her feet no longer blue. And the most powerful man alive made a sound I will never forget, and will never describe to anyone, because some sounds are not ours to repeat. He came up the path, and he stopped in the doorway. He did not come in, he stopped, 3 paces from his own sleeping child, as though he did not trust himself to cross the distance without falling down. And he looked at her, and his whole great frame shook once, hard, the way the earth shakes once when something deep in it finally settles. She followed me, I said quietly, so as not to wake her. Out the gate. I did not take her. I would not have known how to give her back. He did not look at me. He could not stop looking at the child. She has not left her room since, he said. His voice was wrecked. Since the spring. She does not. She will not. She has not spoken. She does not go to anyone. She came to me, I said. I do not know why. But I did know why, or I was beginning to. She had watched them throw me out. A child who has lost her mother knows the shape of a person being made to leave, and something in her had decided, with the terrible clarity of the very young, that she was not going to lose another one without following. I did not say this to the king. It was not mine to say. But he was a smarter man than his grief made him look, and I watched him arrive at it himself, standing in the doorway, and I watched it take him apart. He stayed until the fire burned down. He did not wake her. When Grey came into the windows, he finally crossed the room. Slowly. The way you approach a thing you are afraid will vanish. And he gathered his daughter up against his shoulder. And she stirred and did not wake, and turned her face into his neck out of pure animal habit. And I watched a king discover that his child still knew him in her sleep, even if she would not look at him awake. At the door he stopped again. He looked at me for the first time as though a person, and not an obstacle between him and the only thing he loved. "The brooch," he said. "The theft." I did not believe it. I want you to know I did not believe it. That makes one of you with the authority to do something about it, and a great deal of nothing done, I said, because I was cold and exhausted, and had stopped being able to afford manners somewhere around the gate. He took the blow. He did not flinch from it. "No," he agreed. "Nothing done. I am aware." And he carried his daughter out into the snow, and I shut the door, and I told myself that was the end of it. It was not the end of it. The very next morning, things began to arrive at my door. The first morning it was firewood, a cord of it, dry and split, stacked against the croft wall where there had been none the night before. I told myself Edda had a neighbour. The second morning it was a basket, bread still warm, which meant it had come from a fortress kitchen and been carried fast. A wheel of cheese, a twist of salt, which in winter is a thing you give someone you intend to keep alive. The third morning it was boots, my size, which meant someone had looked at the prints I left in the snow and measured them. I stood in the doorway, holding a pair of good, fur-lined boots, and felt something move in my chest that I did not have a name for, and did not want one. I am not a fool. I knew it was him. But a king does not carry firewood, and a king does not measure a footprint in the snow. And so I told myself it was his people, acting on an order, a debt of guilt being quietly paid. I could accept guilt. Guilt I understood. Guilt was a transaction, and I had spent my life keeping the books on transactions. What I could not account for was the morning I rose before dawn on purpose, and opened the door fast and caught him. The Alpha King of the northern reaches, on one knee in the snow, stacking my firewood with his own hands. He went very still, the way a wolf goes still when it has been seen. For a moment, neither of us moved. The snow came down between us. 3 paces, as always. He was always exactly 3 paces away, I had begun to notice. Near enough to reach, and far enough to deny he had reached. "Your people could do this," I said. They could. He did not stand. He stayed on his knee in the snow, with a split log in his hands, a king brought lower by firewood than any enemy had ever managed. "I find I do not want them to." "Why?" His jaw moved before the words did. I was learning to read him, the way I had learned to read weather and wounds, by the signs that came before the thing itself. "Because she sleeps now," he said. "Since the night she found you. She sleeps through. She came to my chamber 2 nights past, and she did not speak, but she took my hand, and she pulled me to the window, and she pointed north, toward this valley, toward you." He set the log down with great care. "I do not know what you did. I have spent a year doing everything, and I could not do it. And you did it in 1 night, with a fire and a heel of bread, and I cannot. I do not know how to be a man who owes that and does nothing. So I carry firewood. It is the only thing I know how to do with my hands that is not violence. I have been thanked by men before, mostly men who wanted credit for the thanking. This was the first time a man ever offered me his helplessness instead, and I found it was a far harder thing to defend against. "You exiled me," I said, "because I needed something true and hard to hold on to. Your counsel, your gate, your bar coming down." "I countermanded it," he said. "The morning after the croft, I struck your name from the rolls of the exiled, and I sealed it, and I told no one why, because the why is not a thing I have been able to say out loud until this exact moment in the snow, and I am still not certain I have said it." He looked up at me, and the gold had gone out of his eyes and left only a man. "You are not exiled, Marin. You have not been exiled for 3 weeks. You could have come back at any time. I did not tell you, because the moment you knew, you would come back to the fortress. And I did not want you in the fortress. I wanted you here, where she points." The snow kept falling. I stood in my doorway, in the good boots he had measured my feet for, and I understood, all at once, that I had not been left alive out of guilt. I had been kept alive out of something that frightened him so badly he had been smuggling it to me, 1 cord of firewood at a time. He did not leave at once that morning. He stood and brushed the snow from his knee, and then he looked at the croft, at the smoke rising from it, and asked, carefully, as a man asks a question he has decided in advance to accept any answer to, whether he might sit by the fire a while before the walk back. I told him the fire was Edda's, and Edda's fire belonged to whoever was cold, which was the closest I could come to saying yes without admitting I wanted to. So we sat. He took the stool. I took the floor by the hearth, where I had slept 3 weeks, and for a long while neither of us said anything, and the not saying was not uncomfortable, which surprised me. I had not sat in comfortable silence with another adult in a year. "They told me you stole the brooch in the spring," he said at last, watching the fire and not me. "And I let them tell me. I want you to understand that I knew it was a lie, and I let them tell me anyway, because grief makes a man lazy in exactly the places he can least afford it. I let a great many things happen in my house this year by simply not looking at them." "Grief is not laziness," I said. "I have seen both. They only look alike from the outside." He turned his head at that. "You have lost someone." "My mother, when I was younger than Sela. My place in the pack 3 weeks ago, which is its own kind of death, the kind where you have to keep walking around afterward." I prodded the fire. "I am not telling you this for pity. I am telling you so you will stop apologizing. Because a man who apologizes in a circle never gets anywhere. And you have apologized for the gate 4 times now, and the gate is not the thing you are actually sorry about." The fire snapped between us. He was quiet for a moment, that went on a beat too long. "No," he admitted. "It is not." "Then say the thing you are sorry about, or stop saying any of it." I do not know where the words came from, a year of swallowing them perhaps, but they were out before I had decided to risk them, and I watched them go in, and I watched him decide, visibly, the way a man decides to step off a height, to answer honestly instead of retreating into his rank. "I am sorry," he said slowly, "that the first person to reach my daughter in a year was a woman I had just thrown into the snow. I am sorry that I have built a fortress full of people who could not do for her what a stranger with nothing did in one night. I am sorry that I am sitting at your fire, feeling something I have no right to feel, and no intention of acting on. And I am sorry most of all that I am going to walk back out into the snow in a moment and leave you here, because it is the correct thing to do. And I have never, in my life, wanted less to do the correct thing. The fire was very loud in the silence after that. That, I said when I could, was considerably better than the gate apology. He huffed something that was almost a laugh, and the almost held, and for one moment the wreck of a king was just a tired man warming his hands at a healer's fire, and I thought, oh, this is going to be a great deal of trouble. And then he stood and thanked me, and went out into the snow exactly as he had said he would, because he was, underneath all of it, a man who did the correct thing. I sat by the fire a long time after the door closed, and was honest with myself about how much I had wanted him not to. If you have come this far with me, stay, because what happens next is the part I still cannot fully explain. The night the storm came down, and I learned exactly how far someone was willing to go to put me back out in the snow for good. If this is the kind of story you would sit up by a fire for, the door is open. Come in and stay a while. His late mate's sister did not intend to let any of it stand. I learned her name the way you learn the name of a cold front, by the damage. Gerda, sister to the dead Luna, and she had spent a year making herself indispensable to the grieving king, running his household, sitting at the right hand of his sorrow, positioning herself as the natural mother for a motherless pup, and the natural Luna for a king too broken to choose. The brooch in my things had been her work. I had served in the Luna's chambers once, briefly, and she had needed an early thief to clear the field. She had not expected the field to refill itself with a healer in a snowbound croft. She came to the croft on the pretext of retrieving the child's things, with 2 of the king's guard and a writ she had no right to. I knew her by the cold coming off her before she reached the door. "The king's daughter has been seen here repeatedly," she said. "An exiled thief, alone with a vulnerable child of the royal line. You understand how this looks. I am here to put it right before it becomes a scandal that touches the throne." "I am not exiled," I said. "Ask the king's seal. And the child comes here on her own feet and leaves on her father's shoulder. And there has been a witness to every moment, which is more than I can say for whoever put a brooch where a brooch had no business being." I watched that land. I watched her recalculate. The frightened always recalculate in their faces. It is the one tell they cannot train out. "You should be careful," she said softly. "Alone out here. The valley is wild. Accidents happen to women who reach above themselves." And that was the first of her 2 mistakes, because she made it in front of the king's own guard, who were not as loyal to her as she believed, and one of them remembered it later when it mattered. Her second mistake nearly killed the child. It was the worst storm of the winter, the kind the old wolves call a white wolf that comes down off the northern ice and eats the world. Gerda chose that night to take Sela from the fortress, to bring her back to the croft, she told the guard, where the child was calmer. An act of mercy in the king's name. It was no such thing. She meant to be seen doing the loving thing, the maternal thing, while the storm did the rest of the work she could not be seen to do. A child lost in a white wolf. A healer to blame for luring her out. Two problems solved by one blameless storm. She did not account for the child slipping the sledge in the dark and running. North, toward the valley, toward me. I knew before I knew. I had not slept. The storm was wrong, too loud, and I had learned that year to trust the wrongness. I opened my door against a wind that tried to take it off its hinges, and I saw, at the very edge of the firelight, small prints in the snow already half filled. I went out into the white wolf after her. I will not pretend I was brave. I was terrified, and the cold was a living thing that drove straight through the wool and the good boots, and into the bone, into the marrow. A cold that did not want to chill me, but to stop me, to lay me down in the soft white and keep me. I went anyway. I called her name into a wind that ate it. I followed prints that the storm erased ahead of me as fast as I found them, and twice I went down, and twice the cold said, "Stay down, it is warmer here." And twice I got up because there was a child somewhere ahead of me with her mother's silence in her throat, and I was not going to be the second person that pup watched disappear into the snow. I found her in the lee of a fallen pine, curled small, not moving. I got my cloak around her. I got her against me, and then I could not find the croft. The storm had taken the world. There was no up valley or down. There was only white, and the cold winning. And I did the only thing left, which was to stop and put my body around the child and hold the small spark of her against the dark and refuse, with everything I had left, to let it go out. That is how he found us, the way he had found her once before, by the sound a grief makes when it is given a direction to run in. He came out of the white wolf in his wolf shape, vast and dark and impossible. And he changed in the snow and gathered us both up, the child and the woman holding her, into arms that should not have been able to lift us, and did. He got us to the croft. He got the fire roaring. He worked over his daughter with the desperate competence of a parent, while I shook by the hearth. And when Sela coughed and opened her eyes and reached for him, he made the sound again, the one that is not ours to repeat. And he gathered her in. And then the child did the thing none of us were ready for. "Papa," she said, her first word in a year, cracked and small and certain. "Papa, the lady went out in the snow for me." The king went still. He looked at his daughter, who had spoken. Who had spoken? And then he looked at me, shaking by his hearth, with the storm still in my bones and my hands cut from gripping the frozen latch, and I watched the last of the legend fall off him entirely, until there was only a man kneeling on a healer's floor, with his whole heart laid open on the boards in front of him. "Say it again," he asked his daughter very gently. Say her name. I want to learn it the way you say it." "Marin," said the pup, as though it were obvious, as though it had always been obvious, as though everyone had simply been waiting for the grown-ups to catch up. "Marin went out in the snow." He looked at me across the fire. 3 paces, as always, and then, for the first time, he closed them. Gerda's reckoning was swift, and it was public, which is the only kind that satisfies a pack. The guard who had heard her speak of accidents in the wild spoke of it before the assembled hall. The factor who had paid for a stolen brooch was found. The story of a child taken into a white wolf on the pretext of mercy needed very little telling, because the territory could do the arithmetic, and the arithmetic was a small girl's prince in killing snow. She was stripped of her place in the household and put out of the territory, not in the snow. The king was careful about that. He is not a man who answers cruelty with its mirror, but east, to her own distant kin, with an escort to see her gone and a writ forbidding her return. I am told she lives quietly now. I find I do not think about her often. The page she is on is not one I keep. He came to the croft 3 days after, when the storm had blown itself out and the world was white and silent and new. He stood in the doorway, old habit, the 3 paces, the threshold he would not cross uninvited even now, with his daughter's hand in his, and Seela looked up at me, and then up at him, and made a small, impatient sound, because she had recovered her voice and intended to use it. "You may as well come in," I said. "Both of you. I have stopped being able to keep the door shut against this family, and I am tired of pretending otherwise." He crossed the threshold. The pup ran ahead of him to the hearth, as though she had always lived there, which in every way that counted she had begun to. "I struck your name from the exiled rolls weeks ago," he said. "I told you that. What I did not tell you is what I want to write in its place." His jaw moved. He made the words come the hard way, which is the only way that has ever counted with him. There is a chair at the long table that has been empty a year. There is a child who said your name before she said mine. There is a man who has carried firewood through 3 weeks of snow because he did not have the courage to carry the truth. I am not asking you to forgive the gate. I am asking you to come in out of the cold and not leave. As my Luna, if you will have the crown. As Marin, if you will only have me. The order does not matter to me. It never did. I will not tell you about the kiss, except this. It was the first warm thing in a winter that had tried very hard to teach me there were none. And it asked nothing of me and took nothing from me, which after a lifetime of being a transaction was so unfamiliar that I nearly did not recognize it for what it was. When we came apart, he rested his forehead against mine and breathed out, long and ragged. A king, setting down a grief he had carried so long he had forgotten it had a bottom. "Papa," said Seela from the hearth, with the deep disgust of the very young. "You are standing in the doorway again." We were. We came inside. He shut the door behind us, and for the first time all winter, the open threshold was not a thing I was leaving through or letting cold in by. It was only a door in a warm room with the right people on the inside of it. It is a year later now, as I tell you this. The croft still stands. We kept it, Edda and I, for the healing it is good for, and because some doors should stay the kind that open. But I live in the fortress now, at the long table, in the chair that is no longer empty. The territory adjusted to a Luna who was once an exile faster than the lords expected, mostly because the freed and the fed and the healed in the lower villages had long memories and loud voices, and because a pup who points at what she wants is a difficult thing to argue with. Seela talks now. She talks, in fact, almost without stopping, as though making up a year all at once, and her favourite story, the one she demands at every hearth, to every visiting lord, to the great embarrassment of her father, is the story of the night she followed the lady out the gate and sat at her door and would not be moved. "I knew," she tells them, with the absolute authority of a 6-year-old who has been proven right about the only thing that ever mattered. "Papa did not know yet, but I knew." She is insufferable about it. She is also entirely correct, which makes it worse. Some nights I catch him watching the door, the fortress door, the great barred one, with an expression I have learned to read. He is thinking about a gate coming down, and a wool cloak, and how close the arithmetic ran. He does not say it. He does not need to. I learnt to read him from his hands a long time ago, on a doorstep in the snow, and I have never once regretted opening that door, not even on the coldest nights, when the wind comes down off the ice, and I lie warm between a king who carries firewood and a pup who refused to be left behind, and I think, they threw me out in the snow with a cloak and a heel of bread, and I walked straight into the only home I have ever had. So tell me, did you know, the way the pup knew, before any of the grown-ups caught up? Or did you think, like I did, that I was walking away from everything? Stay and tell me where you are listening from tonight, and whether anyone ever followed you home through the snow and refused to leave. And if this was the kind of story you would sit up by a fire for, you know what to do. The door is open. Come back. I will leave it that way.